Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. My infant is asleep in the next room, and so I have been instructed not to yell.
Right. I was going to say, this the vibe that you're opening the show with is far too calm and low energy, and this is Schubert's Eighth Symphony.
Yeah, it does have a very NPR vibe about it, doesn't it? And this is Chopin's Nocturne in C.
So long, Tom? How long do we give him before he breaks that promise?
Before he breaks the promise and wakes up his infant son.
Leave the show early to go and put the infant son back to bed.
I think looking at the stories that we've got lined up here, I reckon before the first one's even done, because it involves the interest rate hikes, and as the homeowner among us, I know it'll piss George off the most.
Yeah,
long is the answer.
What we've done is we've lined up a perfect gauntlet for George to run to see if he is capable of not yelling for an entire podcast. It might be the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
It's been a big news week this week, so we've selected what we think are probably the cherries from this week. Starting us off, as Tom said, the thing that will obviously be George's greatest challenge is the fact that the government has, Allan Fels from the ACTU initiated report they've released a report into price gouging. I fucked that intro, but they've released a report. Into
you got
price
the
gouging.
information across.
Adam, I love you no matter what you do. Okay, there's nothing that your mother and I are gonna love you no matter what.
Oh my god, I can already hear it in George's voice. He's trying. We haven't even got to the details of the story, and he's struggling.
Also, does that make George my daddy in that sentence?
Yeah,
anyway,
Tom's your mum.
Yeah. So there was a report released by...
Hey, I'm your daddy.
There's a whole subgenre there that we won't get into. So it's a report that's been released by the former chair of the ACCC, Allan Fels, and it's analysed price gouging and pricing practices by big businesses, particularly in, after the COVID sort of pandemic, so over the last number of years, and the effect those have had in particular on inflation. And the report was, I think the word has been damning. Damning?
Yep, a report is often damning if it is particularly spicy, shall we say?
Yeah, there's only a few kinds
blistering.
Of I was going to say the other option is blistering. You can have damning, blistering, or I don't know what else. What other kinds of reports can you have?
Right, can you have a milk toast report? Like they never really report. Journalists never really write about these reports.
Boring reports.
The report is like, someone should go to jail.
I know. It'd be a flop. The report was a flop. So blistering, a flop, or what was the other one? Damning.
Damning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it's been particularly damning because, I guess the pull quote here, the headline is that they're saying that Qantas's decision to reduce their flight capacity may have directly led to the Royal Bank of Australia hiking up interest rates.
Reserve Bank.
And,
so
what did I say? I meant to say
Royal
Reserve Bank. Royal Bank? Oh, yeah, much of a muchness. We're still under a monarchy.
Yeah.
Well, that is until King Charles kicks the bucket with this new cancer diagnosis.
Well, it turns out he was diagnosed with cancer, RIP. So
Liz Truss strikes again. She shook his hand recently.
It's Liz Truss's fault. Yeah.
Liz Truss
comes and she gets a UAV. That's the
Liz Truss needs to be checked for fox die. That's all I'm saying.
That's
one for the Metal Gear Solid fans. Moving on.
I prefer if she saves them up and uses it for dogs. I feel like the UAV doesn't really give you that much.
So another nerd reference.
So the outcome of this report basically is that banks, supermarkets, aviation, and energy companies have been exploiting their market power in ways that drive up inflation and hurt Australian households, and then have the flow-on effect, as Tom said, of being part of the inflation that then causes the Reserve Bank to turn around and raise interest rates, further hurting households, and then causing them to pay more for their mortgages and other kinds of loans, for which the banks then will additionally profit, because they've been doing this thing that we talk about where they raise your home loan rate straight away, but they don't raise your savings rate in accordance. So there's a lag between your home loan rate going up and the time between when they eventually raise your savings rate. So they're making money off the difference in between there as well. So it's like we're getting pinged from 3 different directions as Australian consumers. The big companies are raising prices because they can, because we live in an oligopoly, essentially, or duopolies in the case of supermarkets. And then prices go up. The Reserve Bank goes, oh, that inflation's gone up. Prices have gone up. What should we do? Raise interest rates. Interest rates go up. So our mortgages and repayments and rents all go up as a result. And then they go, oh, the rates have all gone up. So let's ping them again with the savings from the bank. So we're just getting pinged in all directions. A real inflation bukkake scene that we've found ourselves in as the Australian people.
Jeez. I think the good quote from this article, which is, again, an ABC article that I think probably summarizes sort of why this happened, it was that Allan Fels said that companies have been able to leverage the disruptions and uncertainty that followed the COVID pandemic into unprecedented profitability. So basically what they've done is they've said, oh, well, our supply, and you'll remember, if anyone who,
where are we going to get the toilet paper? Supply chains. What are we going to do?
And disruption. I worked, in construction, and, everyone was like, oh, everything costs, $1 billion. We've got shortages of this. We can't get timber and yada, 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 yada. But throughout that, what it meant was people, certain elements of various industries, were able to go, well, I guess, we could probably just...
It's just more expensive now. Yeah, it's in the back of everyone's minds that COVID means that some things might be more expensive, because all the reporting's telling us that, when all the more in-depth things about inflation, about fucking supply chains and all that sort of stuff. So it's in the back of our brains that, things are gonna get more expensive. Yeah. So then a company can just go, I'll make things more expensive, and people won't think that's weird, even if they don't have the legitimate reason of a supply chain or inflation.
It's like the pandemic ended, and it's like we forgot that, when it stopped, the pandemic is over. You know what I mean?
Might argue the pandemic is not over, but those kinds of logistical concerns.
There was a report from Bloomberg, I think it was like a year ago, which talked about, we've talked about on the show before, price over volume strategy versus volume over price. Up until the last decade or two, it's been volume over price. Companies have been trying to compete to get your business, right? So they will move more units at a lower price in order to get stuff out there. And what the pandemic has done is transitioned to a price over volume strategy, which basically means we'll make fewer units knowing that the price is going to go up. So we have to have, less labor, less materials, less whatever, and we'll sell it at a higher margin, make even more money than we were making before, and at a profit. Right, so it's something that
Nvidia, is that you? Has George dropped off the call and graphics card manufacturer Nvidia's just jumped on?
Paging Dr. Nvidia to the floor. It's and there have been reports which have talked about this phenomena of price over volume in the past as well. There was a report a year ago talking about how corporate profits were responsible for 60-something% of inflation. The community has been crying out to this effect and saying, it's not because we've all got money to spend, it's because we live in these horrendous duopolies and oligopolies, and we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice to buy groceries or not. We don't have a choice to live somewhere, to pay rent. We don't have a choice to put petrol in our car and go to the places that we need to go. These are necessities. Okay. It's not like you can go, well, I'm not going to go to work today because I'm going to save some money. It's you have to go to work because you need money to live. So it's this is all stuff that we've talked about on the show and recognized previously and pointed out as a problem. But it is very nice to see it in the report and go, hey, you guys aren't crazy. Like, the big companies are stooging you. And that's why you'll see in Woolworths, I sent you guys the photo where, what was the product? I forget what the product was, but
it was Carmen's muesli bars.
Carmen's muesli bars. They're $5, down from $6.49 on the 1st of October last year. So, like, don't sue us. We're not price gouging. Look, prices are down. There was this, and now it's lower. So please don't hurt us.
Yeah, like I remember having a similar thing. This is going to make me sound like a huge like toffee wanker. But Tasmanian heritage brie cheese was my big bugbear for this. Always love to get me some of that. Makes a good French Bastille Day lunch platter. But yeah, I saw and I'm always on the lookout for that little yellow tab, like the special. You're like, oh, the Tasmanian heritage brie cheese is on special. Well, I'm definitely picking that up this week. But I saw it to be like 30% off, which would normally make me rub my hands together. But it was 30% off for like $10. And I was like, wait a minute. No, normally it's like $10. That's weird. Like 30% off. Normally I'm thinking like, oh, some like $7 cheese. Excellent. And then I look at it and it says like it's 30% off $14.50. And I was like, when did it suddenly cost $14.50?
When they wanted to put a sticker on it that said it was 30% off so they could sell it for the normal price, and you think you're getting a discount. Yeah.
Yes. Brie cheese is that's the big they're stooging you. They're stooging you on your fine cheese.
Oh, $7 each, but only if you buy two. I was like, well, I don't need two. I only need one. So it's not really half off if I have to buy two of them. So
can I freeze this cheese? Can I make that second one last longer?
And that's part of this report, is talking about a lot of these deceptive sort of pricing and tagging and discounting practices that supermarkets have been doing, where they'll whack you. You go down the aisle at Coles, everything's got a fucking sticker on it. Prices are down, and they're trying to make out as if the entire store is discounted. But like you say, like, you go in there, you look at it, somehow still walk out with 5 things and I've paid $200. Like, the olive oil's $55. I don't think I'm getting a fucking bargain, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, and I had the same with milk literally yesterday. I remember I had to buy for the first time in a long time. I think the Coles milk, because I remember all those stories of like, oh, they're screwing over the farmers and all these sorts of things. Like, try to go for the other brands to not, because big business is fucking over dairy farmers, and me only understanding half of that premise, and me sort of go like, all right, well, I won't buy the Coles milk then. I'll like make sure to go for another one. But the one I normally got was completely sold out. I guess clearly because it was maybe the best bang for buck that wasn't the Coles one, but. Fucking one of the other brands, 2-liter milks was like $8.
Yeah.
Which I was like, when did that happen?
Yeah, we buy expensive milk. It's like $6 or something, $7 for like a 2-liter. It's a carton, and I'm like, I don't know why we do that.
Yeah, but why are we doing this?
In case you thought that all these record corporate profits were going back to the suppliers, the farmers, and everything else, and it was trickling down our leg. The economic stimulus is trickling down our leg to the people that are supplying the big corporations. You'd be wrong.
Hell no.
Because basically what it does is that for Coles, Woolies, and these other big companies, Qantas, while a lot of them have been under the microscope, their share prices are doing very well. Their investors are doing very well.
Won't somebody think of the shareholders?
This is probably, a point about Qantas. Allan Joyce, for all his faults, was often credited at turning around Qantas in terms of like the share price and doing well by investors. As Tom said, one of the things, Qantas has been singled out in terms of the airline sector, basically for reducing its domestic flight capacity. Now, I read somewhere that I think it was, now I've got to get the month right. Is it in this article or somewhere else? I think it might have been somewhere else. But in the month of November last year, so 23, they had, 40 on the main 3 routes, so Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney in Australia, their domestic flights, 43.5% of their flights were either delayed or cancelled.
Yeah, which is... Those aren't good odds.
That's fucking like 1 in 2 flights was either going to be delayed or cancelled on the busiest routes in Australia. I think it was the month of November last year. I mean, I could be slightly wrong.
No, I think that's right.
But
no, and I think that would probably. I'd love to hear what Virgin and the others' stats are for that, because that was an exact period where fucking like we had 3 Virgin cancellations in like an 18-hour period. Like the night of, cancelled, you booked for the next morning, that was cancelled. They booked us on one in the afternoon that we then moved to another one because that time didn't work. But the one that they had originally put us on did not go. Like,
and the thing is, like, it's not like they're reducing their prices because of this. The prices are as high as they've been in the last, like, prior to the pandemic. Like there's no, they haven't done a bell curve. It's basically they've gone up and just stayed up.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to combine this to be like also some kind of casino. Like you're kind of playing a bit of like a roulette wheel of like pay $1,000 to fly from fucking Sydney to Melbourne, but it may not go. Put up some flashing lights, do like music, and
Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that Alan Fels has pointed out specifically here is that in May 2022, this is the year 2 years ago, Qantas cut its domestic capacity by 10%, which, and it was in an announcement to the ASX in June, the airline said it was adjusting its domestic capacity levels for much of financial year 23 to assist in the recovery of sustained high fuel prices. And then it cut capacity a further 5% in July and August, followed by another planned cut of 10% in October. So they just gradually, throughout 2022, they were just cutting capacity. But
by the end of 2022 here, it says that they had like an average airfare of like $500 for Sydney to Melbourne. So it sounded like while they were like cutting back this, you know, their capacity slowly over the year, they were also making them more expensive.
Price over volume.
Yeah.
And then obviously, you know, at the end of the pandemic, I mean, this in theory, that the pandemic had already sort of finished by that point. Not finished. I know
it started simmering down.
It started simmering down. Of lockdowns and quarantines and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
But I remember, that year, even last year, you know, trying to get in the peak season of December, trying to get a cheap flight back to Hobart was like, it was like $500 one way, you know, like for one person. And again, Qantas would then go on to post a record profit of 2.47 billion with a B for 22-23. So they were fine. They did fine.
Yeah, they did great. Turns out if you run fewer flights and charge more for them, you make more money.
Yeah.
And,
you know, and then not to mention the whole, like, what was it? The ghost flights thing that they're currently being investigated for.
Where they were charging people for flights that they knew weren't going to take off.
Qantas is one. The electricity sector's been singled out for price gouging. In fact, as we reported on the other week, like bulk energy prices are actually quite low.
And that's the thing. So this has been a similar dynamic that's played out in Woolworths and Coles, is that meat was quite expensive for a while. The wholesale prices were quite high. In recent months, the wholesale prices have skipped down, have dropped in like orders of magnitude. And yet the prices that we're paying for meat at the supermarket are still what they were yesterday. So what's happening? Well, Woolies and Coles are just pocketing the difference, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing's happening with wholesale electricity prices. Everyone's freaking out about the Ukraine-Russia war. Oh, there's not going to be any energy. We're going to be rubbing our hands over a burning, oil drum like a homeless person. It's going to be an unhoused person encampment in everyone's house. We're going to be, standing over fire barrels in order to heat ourselves. So energy prices go through the roof.
To burn the books to be able to keep warm. And,
we're going to have to ironically burn a copy of Fahrenheit 451 in order to keep warm. And that's a book about book burning. So the idea, so everyone freaks out. Energy prices go through, wholesale energy prices go through the roof. Energy gets purchased, but like since the Russia-Ukraine war started 2 years ago, like things have eased off. Like crude oil prices and other things are more or less where they were before the conflict started, and yet, you're still paying like $300 a month for gas. It's like, why is that? There's all these people in the middle that even though their prices, their costings have gone to normal, they've just decided to pocket the difference. And I'm not a raging socialist, You know, like I don't think
For
that
now.
for now. Like, I do think a well-regulated market is like the way to handle most things like this, like the market, and obviously you have market failures and all that sort of stuff, which we've discussed as well. But I do think the government has a place in regulating the market to make sure that the worst impulses of people and capitalists aren't exerted on the end user. Because if left to their own devices, if we all just go invisible hand in the market, of course that's what's going to happen, is everyone's going to exercise their worst impulses and do things that are the most profitable to them, even at the cost of the maintenance of the system, even at the cost of like everything staying, the structures staying in place. They will compromise it to the benefit of themselves if that's what it takes. So
the algorithm doesn't have a social conscience factor. The algorithm is profit at all costs.
And unfortunately, probably the government doesn't have that conscience factor in it as well, because often they are all profiting off the same system, right?
Well, like you talk about, who do you think their donors are?
Like how many of the members of Congress in the states all like, you know, sell or buy shares just before certain decisions are made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So,
and also, like, you know, the government does get, you know, if a price is higher, your GST revenue from that is higher.
Well, everyone benefits, right? That's why the state government really hasn't taken an active hand in addressing housing affordability, because when house prices go up, they get more stamp duty. If you're paying whatever it is, you know, 50 grand on $1 million house as opposed to 25 grand on a $500,000 house, well, that's better for the state government's coffers, isn't it? Like, so at every point, everyone is incentivized to make number go up.
Up to the right.
Up and to the right.
Yeah.
And no one is actually, like, it gets to a point now where, you know, it's fine as long as people are able to pay it, I guess. If number goes up and to the right and the price of your house goes up and the price of your stocks go up and your wages are going up, and so it doesn't feel like you're going backwards, then that's an ideal scenario. That's a case where everyone's winning, right? And then we're all increasing our prosperity. There's more wealth generated. Like, that's the merry-go-round. But if
everything's going up and to the right, nothing's changing.
Yeah, like, but everyone feels richer on paper, Tom. The number go up. You see what I mean?
No, but I mean, everyone feels richer on paper, but if you're like, if you're poor as hell but your wages go up, but also the costs of everything also go up in equal measure, you're still poor as hell when you're at the high end of the graph on the right.
The ideal scenario is that your wages grow not just in proportion to the cost of living, but in excess of the cost of living, that you have more more purchasing power. But it hasn't happened.
People are garbage.
It hasn't happened for 30 years where productivity and wage growth has outpaced cost of living increases. And so, but the next best thing, I guess, is that you have a situation where, well, property prices go up and asset growth goes up. And then people feel, oh, I can remortgage my house, or I can do a reverse mortgage, or there's all this equity locked up in my home, and now I'm rich because my house is worth $1 million. But the thing that people don't consider is, if you have to sell that house and buy another house, you're buying and selling in the same market. So it's like, yes, you have more money.
Your purchasing power is shit house.
But your purchasing power hasn't actually changed. So that's why I think a lot of these strategies the government has used or allowed, maybe would be the better way of phrasing it, that have allowed people to feel rich, are kind of silly, because it's kind of very short term. You're not building real wealth or real productivity growth. You're not investing in the real economy. You're just watching a number go up on a screen and feeling better as a result. And you'd be surprised how much that dictates consumer sentiment as well. They're like, oh, I've got lots of money in my account because I've got X lots of shares. You're just looking at a number on a screen. Oh, I'm worth 300,000 today. Oh no, today I'm worth 200,000. I'm all poor. It's like, but the amount of cash flow that you've got hasn't actually changed, like the amount of money coming in versus going out. But it's the way you feel, and then that dictates what people. That's why we say the stock market is a graph of rich people's feelings, because that's what it is, really. Like,
but like the thing is, like what you've just described there is basically a balance sheet, and this is the thing I've always thought about, is that, you know, they don't teach that in schools. I had to go to university. I had to go to a master's course for someone to describe to me what assets versus liabilities were. Yeah. And I was like, right, that makes a lot of sense. Wait, hang
sounds
on.
like maybe I should have learnt this in year 9, maybe?
Yeah, literally. But anyway, look, to get back to the story,
Sure.
the report, which was commissioned by the ACTU, so it was commissioned by a union.
Yeah, because they knew what it would find, right? Like they weren't.
Yeah.
No one was under any illusions as to what was going to be found. They're like, we know what's going to say, and it's going to look pretty good for us, the union, right? Like,
and it has, I think, 35 key recommendations to government. Now, in case you, as George said, you think that the government has the government might step in and start perhaps capping prices.
Nope.
You'd be wrong. I don't think any government in Australia would be. There's not the political capital to do that, because that would be socialism, and that's not good. Well, at least not good in the eyes of Peter Dutton and the Nationals. Yeah. But yeah, some of the recommendations were such as like, so Allan Fels suggested the government could establish a commission on competition and prices to review the government and other restrictions on competition and high prices that were caused. I mean, that basically just sounds like what the ACCC...
What the ACCC is supposed to be doing. That's
anyway.
What their current job is, supposedly.
Allan Fels did also say that, that the ACCC probably should look at some of this.
As someone who used to work at the ACCC, he would know.
So, whether or not the government sort of acts on this inquiry, they've got no obligation to. They didn't commission it. There wasn't an election promise.
Yeah, it's frankly, they would consider it inconvenient. Yeah.
Whether or not anything happens from this, I don't know. But if
it
you,
won't.
if you felt,
I know it won't.
But if you, as a consumer, if you feel like things don't quite stack up and you're getting screwed, well, you'd be right, and you can feel justified now in that feeling. Vindication. Now, speaking of property prices, there's an interesting story that George posted up this week of a case in Queensland, which is pretty unique, I would say, and is a lot about what my old job used to be about. But basically, the Queensland government lost an appeal over a $2.7 million payout to a Gold Coast couple and family who were victims of mortgage fraud. So this, I'm going to explain sort of what happened, and then we'll talk about the ramifications. So in what year was it? 2018. The Moorcrofts, who are from Victoria, they bought a Mermaid Beach property in the Gold Coast for $1.2 million at a mortgagee auction. Now, what is a mortgagee auction? A mortgagee auction basically means the person who had someone who had a mortgage on their property wasn't able to pay it, so now the mortgagee stepped in and they're liquidating the asset to get their money back, basically, right? So normally it'd be like CBA being like, you've defaulted on your loan, we're selling your house. Yeah. So they later discovered that the home still belonged to the former owner, who was called Ms. Issa. When soon after settlement in 2018, the couple were unable to transfer the home into their names because the Register of Titles, so the Titles Office, had put a caveat over the property. So what happened? So it turns out
explain what a caveat is.
A caveat is basically it's a legal. It's kind of like a legal roadblock. So if you've got a certificate of title, you can't deal on that title. So sell it, register a mortgage, do other things. If there is a caveat in place, a caveat basically means buyer beware, right? That's kind of the literal translation to it, or caveat, if you want to call it that as well. But in terms of title law, it's a roadblock. You can't do anything on it if there's a caveat on it. Now,
you know the reason there was a caveat on it?
Well, the Titles Office had put the caveat on it. Now, the reason probably is related to this bit, because the former owner, so Ms. Issa, had claimed that her home had been fraudulently mortgaged by criminals, and that she'd basically written to the Titles Office explaining that. So I guess the Titles Office has gotten that correspondence and gone, put a caveat on this, stop anything else happening with it.
Yeah, it's kind of like cancelling your card or putting a freeze on your transactions when you suspect you've been hacked or something with your bank.
Exactly right. That we don't know what's going on. Something sounds pretty dodgy. So
nothing can be done with this property until we've sorted this out.
Let's put an asterisk on it, and we'll come back to it later.
But what had basically happened was, so apparently a relative of the owner, Ms. Issa, had to pay off some other liability they had. they used her property to lodge a mortgage. So they basically went to a bank. So one of her relatives has gone to the bank and gone, I want to take a mortgage out over this house. Then they forged her signature, and the bank went, yeah, great, here's $400,000 or however much it was. Probably more than that, given it's a $1.2 million house.
Commish, all the commish.
Right.
Commission, says that bank person.
Yeah. And then obviously that relative hasn't paid the bills, and then that bank has then gone in and legally gone, well, we've got rights to this, and they've sold it. But Ms. Isda, who's obviously doesn't live there, has got no idea about any of this.
Shit.
So the best part about it is the people that you pay to do the transaction in this case, so your lawyers, your conveyancers, none of them seem to have actually, the bank who was selling the property, none of them have fucking checked what was going on.
I just don't.
None of them have checked that there's none of them have checked that there's a caveat on the fucking title.
Hi,
just sold it.
George Tsipos, Keeping It Real Times. I'm just curious about why it's anyone's fault that CommBank is out $400,000 that they gave to someone who committed fraud. Like, I don't know why Miss Issa is out of house. I don't know why these people are out of house that is owed to Miss Issa. Like, it seems like of all the organizations that could be left holding the bag, it's just like, it's never CommBank. It's never.
Well, I don't typically, I don't know who the mortgagee
whatever. It's never the bank. It's always like individuals on the hook for the crimes or alleged crimes of this family member of Miss Issa. It's like, if anyone's responsible, he's responsible. The $400,000 should be recovered from him. Yeah. And then the bank's insurance should wear it, surely. Like, you would think that. But like, there have been cases in Victoria which, where similar sort of things have happened where fraud has happened within property transactions. It's fraud. It's a crime. And the bank has just gone, oh, not our problem. Or like, we'll give you a portion. We won't give you the full amount of the value of the property. We'll give you a portion. We'll refund you certain things. This is what is the point? Honestly, what is the point of a bank? We're not completely irresponsible. And to be fair, they're not completely irresponsible. There are multiple links in the chain here where this whole thing fell down. Yeah, but you have a fraud process, right? Like, it is your responsibility. If you give money to people, if you give someone $400,000 against a thing and that thing turns out not to be real, like, well, whose responsibility is that? It's not my responsibility. You're the bank. Like, you're supposed to have processes and procedures in place to make sure. Yeah. And a certain amount of fraud happens as a large bank. Like, that's part of the cost of doing business is every now and then you're going to get 1% of the time, you're going to get stooged by someone for this money. And you need to build that into your business model. I just don't understand why all of the risk of the organization just gets outsourced to individuals. They go, oh, it's your problem. We're selling the house. It's like, well, no, it's your problem because you went and fucked up and gave someone $400,000 that they weren't entitled to. Based on a fraudulent signature, yeah. Sure. And the weird thing here is the taxpayers of Queensland are the ones that are covering this loss. Which, yeah, because that's the extra step here, right? Is that essentially that this couple, the family, the Moorcrofts, discovered that the house that they bought and have lived in for 5 years may not belong to them, which is just the crazy realization that you can have here. And they've been challenging this for the better part of a decade. And I guess they didn't win the appeal. Like, the Queensland government lost the appeal to not have to compensate them. So I guess they're at least the people who have also just handed over $1 million for something that they're then told can't be theirs, or at least not stooged in this, but that the stooging has just been knocked on to the Queensland taxpayers rather than who's responsible. I guarantee they've been making bloody mortgage repayments the whole time. They don't get a holiday 100%. On their mortgage, right? Just because the house isn't theirs. No, well, you still owe us the money. You still got to pay every month. You still got to give us the fucking money every month. Yeah. Where's the money, Mr. Moorcroft? The bank wants their fucking money. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? It's just like, oh, you might not own the house that you're in. It's like, oh, okay, so I don't have your interest rates have gone up. I don't have to pay anything until we sort this out, right? Because I don't want to be paying mortgage on a house on a property that isn't mine. That isn't mine. If this mortgage isn't legit, I'm not going to pay anything on it. The biggest purchase anyone will ever make in their life.
Yeah, crazy.
The best part about this is in my mind is because I used to do this. This used to be my job, was going through and doing property settlements and checking for caveats. The thing is, assuming this happened not on PEXA, I mean, if this happened on PEXA now, which is the national sort of property settlement scheme,
digital
settlements, this probably wouldn't happen because I would have thought the software would have flagged caveats. It would go, there's a caveat, we're not going to settle. It would automatically shut it down, right? But the thing is, if this happened, and this is the reason why I think it happened in person, because it was around the time PEXA was just starting to get market share. And also Queensland were a bit late to the party from memory back then. So I imagine it would have happened in person. And that means there would have been 4 people, probably 5 or 6 at that settlement. So you would have had the vendors rep, the purchasers rep, the outgoing mortgagees rep, the incoming mortgagees rep, and maybe some caveators as well, assuming there wasn't just the one caveat. Well, maybe there wasn't any caveators because they didn't know there was a caveat on the title. But there are at least 4 people there who should have been looking at all this and clearly didn't. And the conveyancers
isn't it the job of the conveyancer? Isn't that what you pay for when you pay $1,600 or whatever it is to a conveyancing service to check out all this shit and make sure it's all correct before it goes through? They'll charge you and they'll itemize it. They go, here's the time that I spent on the thing. Here's the title search that I did. It's $30 for the title search. It's itemized in the receipt. The thing
Which is a rip, by the way. You can get it for $7 on.
Well, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm sure that they're charging you extra at every step of the process. But it's like, isn't that the reason a conveyancer exists, is to make sure 100%. All of this shit is legit before it goes through? Like, what is the point of you otherwise?
To your point was that everyone has obfuscated responsibility here, which I find absolutely crazy that it has come back to. Obviously, I mean, the registrar of the titles are the ones that have to eventually, accept or deny any instruments that are lodged with them. So ultimate responsibility does come back to the titles office in any given state. But like,
I guess that's why the government's being sued.
But like, the people, everything, but everyone, to our point earlier, everyone was just interested about getting their little $100 fee along the way, and no one fucking checked it.
Yeah, no one gave.
And this is where we end up. And to be fair, look, I've been in settlement rooms where you've got probably 3 minutes per settlement, less than that, 2 minutes to check it. You've got 2, and then you've got to get to the next one, right? But it doesn't take that long to look at a fucking search, because someone would have had a search there. They would have had to have had a search there that was done that morning. They would have had to have had a search there, and they would have had to have looked at it. And if they haven't looked at it, they weren't doing their fucking job.
I just don't know why the Queensland government is fighting this. Like, I understand they don't want to pay out the money, but it's like, surely we can't establish a precedent where someone buys a house, pays the money, is on the hook for $1.2 million, and then doesn't own the house. Like, surely that the whole system, the whole artifice that we've built around settlements and conveyances and all this type of stuff was built to prevent something exactly like this from happening. Like, this is some 1800s, selling the Eiffel Tower shit. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, you bought something that isn't yours. So it's like, what? Like, surely everything we've done over the last 100 years to build up these systems has been the reason we have a title office is to prevent exactly this sort of shit from happening. So, like, surely we can't allow this to be the precedent where it's like, losers weepers is government policy. Hope you don't buy a house that doesn't end up being yours. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, and I guess I feel like anyone in Queensland should just be furious about this.
Sure.
Like, it's your taxpayer money that's now like being the thing that's paid out for the liability of this. Like, that's not to be like, hey, fuck you, state government. More like you should be furious about this and lobbying your state government and federal government to fucking fix this.
And to be fair, I think the new system we have, which is software, it's digital, there's algorithm, like, I think that does close this problem. It closes the human factor to a certain extent. There are other problems with this system. Like, then it's not perfect, but it should pick up if there are registered interests on a title and should flag them.
20-year-olds running around William Street with a couple of $1 million worth of checks in their briefcase.
Sure, I've never done that. What are you talking
Certainly
about?
Certainly
happen. I didn't run $50 million to the bank before closing time once.
I was talking about a theoretical 20-year-old.
Yeah.
Theoretical 20-year-old.
Yeah, theoretical. None of them named Adam Lorraine.
No, it's fine. Moving on. We are taking a bit of time here, but next article we've got here is about the government. This was actually from the federal government this week, where they've put some legislation through, and they're planning on refining it further, from my understanding, to close loopholes around the right to disconnect from Australian workplaces, and a few other things that are tied in with this bill as well. But basically, the Labor and the Greens and David Pocock, this is why different parties sometimes are good, got together, and they basically are trying to sort of make, I guess, workplace relations a bit fairer. So what are some of the key takeaways here?
So
George?
So it's called the Closing Loopholes Bill, which is not a great, from a marketing perspective, not a great name, but
loopholes in what? I guess the first question.
But Labor's never been one for optics. So the right to disconnect, as you mentioned, Adam, is one of the key features of the bill. So I personally love this as someone who has worked at a number of different tech companies where the expectation is that you are able to be phoned, emailed, Slacked, connected with all hours of the day, expected to be on meetings after hours to update headquarters in London about XYZ or, multiple times a week. I personally think that this is great. Essentially what it would allow is employees to raise, prevent them from being contacted and have those expectations out of hours in the first place. And B, if they are contacted, employees are able to raise a complaint about those phone calls or messages or expectations that they answer those messages out of hours with an employer. So as you imagine, the legal industry is pretty upset about this because that's all they do is expect that their associates are going to work out of hours for them. And the thing, but I guess a part of this, because I know a lot of people have been, I've just seen some sentiment of this being like, wait, so you mean that all things like legal services and all that sort of stuff, all have to be contained within 9 to 5? That just isn't practical for here's a number of scenarios where out of hours was necessary. It's no, it doesn't ban that. It's just you have to be paid for it. It's not like you are paid for 40 hours a week of your 5 8-hour work days. It's no, if you're also expected to be contactable, even if you aren't contacted, if you still have to be reachable, you have to have your Teams notifications on or your work laptop with you at all times or any of that sort of stuff, you have to be being paid, even if you aren't called. Like a surgeon, if you're on call, you get paid. Doesn't matter if you get called or not. Even if someone needs an operation. Yeah.
I mean, it's tricky because a lot of I'm sort of going to get a bit too complex here, but if you're on what they call a contract, where basically if you're on a salary as opposed to a wage, your salary is meant to, in theory, compensate you for these out of hours.
Well, here's the thing.
So we're gonna pay you. Well, our the wage is here at X, but we're gonna pay you Y. Because we believe that there's and all the lawyers' contracts and all these people who are expected to work dumb hours will have provisions in their contracts that say you will be asked to work reasonable overtime. But the thing that's broken in this system is reasonable overtime is not an extra. You're you're going to have to pull an all-nighter once every month when we've got a big contract that needs to come through. It's fucking it's Suits where all of their scenes for some reason in Suits, the TV show,
are at night. At night in the office with whiskey
because they have nothing else. Because in reality, what happens is reasonable overtime becomes always overtime. You are always what it actually means in actuality. If you work in one of these high pressure jobs, is that you will be there from 8:30 a.m. to 9:10 p.m. every night, and that is your life. So that's why that's why all this fucking is happening in the workplace in Suits, is because they don't leave. They're just trapped in a pressure cooker with the same 12 people. Of course, you're going to fuck them at some point. But it's ridiculous because reasonable overtime, the reason that language exists is to account for an odd occurrence every now and then where, hey, the business needs you to do this thing. We understand it's outside of work hours, but we need you to do it, right?
Like, this needs to be done by 9 a.m. tomorrow, and we're not there yet.
And we just got it this afternoon at 5 o'clock. Like, we need you to do this. But that's not how it's used. In practice, how it gets used is reasonable overtime means you're always doing overtime. And we're covered by that clause. So I think hopefully this measure goes some way to address that systemic because billions of dollars of productivity are being not accounted for. In the economic figures, you're getting billions and billions of dollars every year that should be converted into wages that people can then go and spend in the economy. That just isn't, right? So it's actually a productivity drag for all of us. And you think, people go, oh, I got good grades, I've got to go be a lawyer, or I've got to go be a doctor. And, a grad lawyer makes, $80K. Yeah, oh, that's a good salary for a grad, for someone just out of uni, right? But if you're working 80 hours a week, it's like someone earning 50, 40 or 50K.
Yeah.
You're just doing twice the amount of hour. Like, if you break it down into how much you get paid per hour, it's actually not that good of a deal to get paid 80K straight out of uni if you're working twice as much as everyone else. So
it's a sort of like, it's a bit of a, like, I don't know what they tell you in university these days, but like, grads, whether you're in one of the big, consulting firms, whether you're at a bank or something, grads get fucked. Like, if you're a grad, you're going to get stepped on for some reason the system is you get stepped on for 2 years, and then if you're still here at the end of the 3, well, then I guess we start making it better for you.
It's a war of attrition.
Yourself enough,
because with law firms, they know you need to have 2 years of supervised practice before you can go and become an in-house counsel or go and practice on your own or whatever. The legislation is you need to have 2 years working at a firm with a lawyer above you, monitoring you and making sure you're doing a good job before you're allowed. But that's not really about improving the quality of lawyers and associates, making sure the supply of associates is high quality. It's about making sure that they can grind as much blood out of the stone as they can for 2 years before you burn out and quit. And if you make it, great, you make it. But it really is a war of attrition. People go, oh, I'm going to go be a lawyer. It's good money. It's like, if you end up becoming partner, if you're one of the 100 that ends up making it through 15, 20 years and becomes partner, you'll make $1 million a year. But 98%, 99% of people never make it that far. They burn out. So they do that. It's literally, they're throwing you into the meat grinder for the first 2 years to do all the hard work, do all the shit work, knowing that most of them won't make it, and they'll have a fresh supply of bodies right behind them
next year
that can take their place. So it's really pretty gross the way law firms, consultancies, like, it's just not a practical or humane way to treat a workforce. And I don't know why salary jobs get away with it, but like, if I was working at a bar and I worked 12 hours, I would get paid 12 hours. Like, why is it I have to get paid at a bar based on how many hours I work? But if I work at, the top law firm in the country, then it's fine for them to exploit me. It doesn't make sense.
Because they obfuscate it around tens of thousands of dollar figure, right? Like,
and because they're lawyers,
paying you the most money you've ever seen written down in front of you, but you're like, oh no, but that actually kind of, if you do the per hour rate compared to working hospo or whatever, you'd be like, wait a minute. Yeah, this would be like if I worked 24/7 in retail. That's fucked.
If you work on a Sunday in retail, you get whatever it is, time and a half. You get whatever double, you get a loading. Like there is an incentive to work those late nights or weekends or whatever. But for salaried workers who are in white collar jobs, it's just expected that you'll throw yourself into the meat grinder for them. And I don't think that's a fair expectation. Like, it just doesn't, it seems at odds with everything else we've built around, the sort of fair and equitable work standards that have been built up over the last 100 years. But if you're a lawyer, if you know how to word your contract exactly just so, then it doesn't apply to you. Okay.
No. We should just mention, under the new system, employees will be able to raise a complaint about intrusive phone calls or the expectation they answer work emails out of hours with their employer. If the issue is not resolved at the workplace level, employees can apply to the Fair Work Commission for an order on the employer to stop unreasonable out-of-hours contact. A breach of that order is punishable by fines of up to $18,000. So it doesn't solve the issue necessarily. It doesn't wrap it up in a neat little bow, but it just gives you an extra element and probably creates a bit of a deterrent for some employers to exploit it, because then they have to go through all the rigmarole and they're legally obliged to go through that rigmarole.
And they know it's going to be a pain in the ass and they don't want to deal with it. So they don't call or they don't set up a meeting at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I used to work at a place where we were headquartered overseas in London. And so the expectation was that you would be, and this was not how the job was sold to me, by the way, right, during the interview process. It's just became apparent once I started working there, because that's how places operate, that you would be expected to be on calls in the evenings with headquarters in London multiple times a week. And if you got invited to a call at 7 or 9 p.m. on a weeknight, and you couldn't make it, you had to have an explanation as to why you weren't able to make a 9 p.m. call on a Thursday. Right. So there was just this constant drag, this constant expectation that I'm going to do a full work day and then I'm going to go home. I'm going to go commute an hour and a half to go be home and then potentially go and hop on the computer again for another hour and a half. It's just not it's not reasonable to expect people to do that.
The other thing this legislation did was that it helps raise minimum standards, or allows individuals and organisations to apply to the Fair Work Commission for orders to minimum standards in the gig economy, including on pay, penalty rates, superannuation, payment terms, record keeping, insurance, and deactivation. So there's a few different elements to it. There's some rights there for casuals and collectible bargaining.
Casuals being able to go from being casuals to full-time employees, if they are working full-time hours, making that process easier. So a lot of good shit.
Road transport conditions, right of entry. So there's different things there. And I think, Anthony Albanese's already said that there's a couple of tweaks they can do that won't take effect for another couple of months, and they'll make some further tweaks to it before it sort of actually hits the go date, just to sort of get it right. So, this is something that probably wouldn't happen under a coalition government, let me tell you that.
A work choices LNP government, I don't think so. The work choice is the choice to get fired without any repercussions.
Yeah.
Speaking of choices, the Americans have a choice coming up in the November election, and boy, is it a great choice they get to make between two of the oldest men in the world.
And boy, is it a choice. We've got Joe Biden saying some words. So a little bit of background. There was a classified documents case with Joe Biden where classified documents were found at one of his residences. He then cooperated with the investigation, got his lawyers to check all the different places and turn over any unidentified documents. And then a special counsel, who was a Republican from the previous administration appointed by Donald Trump, was appointed to review and determine whether charges need to be laid against President Biden. So here's him talking about the outcome of that report.
I've seen the headlines since the report was released about my willful retention of documents. These assertions are not only misleading, they're just plain wrong. On page 215, if you had a chance, I know it's a thick document. On page 215, the report of the special counsel found the exact opposite. Here's what he wrote. There is, in fact, a shortage of evidence that I willfully retained classified materials related to Afghanistan. On page 12, the special counsel also wrote for another documents. The decision to decline criminal charges was straightforward. The evidence suggests that Mr. Biden did not willfully retain these documents. The evidence said I did not willfully retain these documents. In addition, I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of... Every Memorial Day, we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or passed away. Simple truth is, I sat for a 5-hour interview over 2 days of events, going back 40 years. At the same time I was managing an international crisis, their task was to make a decision about whether to move forward with charges in this case. That's their decision to make. That's the council's decision to make. That's his job. And they decided not to move forward. The bottom line is the matter is now closed. I'm going to continue what I've always focused on, my job of being President of the United States of America.
Well, he was found to have willfully held on to those documents.
Well, he held on to them, but it wasn't unlawful. So because he was cooperating with the investigation and like was forthright when they discovered the documents, like there are no charges that are going to be laid, right? So
the whole point of that decision was to like whether or not we're going to charge you for
all the special counsel is supposed to do is be like, was there a crime here? Are we going to charge it? And he said no. But he's old and forgetful and forgot when his own son died. It's like, that seems extra. That seems like a little in-kind contribution to the Donald Trump campaign there. There's a little sprinkle, a little frisson, of criticism against the president. And that's the main thing that people are criticizing Joe Biden for, right? Is that like his advanced age and people are worried that he's not in full control of all his faculties. Like, so for a special counsel to come out and say that and put that in a report as in like an official document is like not just editorializing. Like you're saying there wasn't enough to hurt, like to charge him with anything, but he's an old man who's losing his marbles. Anyway, peace. Like it's like that's not your job. Like,
I mean, the number of documents we're talking about here are, like one box or two, as
it's
opposed
a handful
to
of documents,
Donald Trump. Who had
Donald Trump's toilet full of fucking
his little document fort, a little shit fort that he had full of documents.
His document fort of like the nuclear codes or something. I thought there was like nuclear stuff.
Plans for a nuclear arms conflict in Iran or something.
Something like that. Like, just absolutely insane. But really, like as much as I'm certainly on the bandwagon of like, man, Joe Biden's old as hell and I'm concerned about his faculties sometimes, I think to just be like, and your son died when? And try to see if you can get him to slip up on that.
Old man says what?
Like, oh my God. And so I think he's justifiably furious.
Yeah, he seemed mad in that clip.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen him that angry.
So given, and the thing that they're criticizing him for, I feel like is like pretty unfair as well. Given Mr. Biden's limited precision and recall during his interviews with his ghostwriter and with our office, jurors may hesitate to place too much evidentiary weight on a single 8-word utterance to his ghostwriter about finding classified documents in Virginia in the absence of other more direct evidence, unquote. We have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury as he did during our interview of him as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, unquote. Wow. He's going to pretend like he's a poor old man, but we all know that he's Satan. It's pretty unreal to editorialize like that. Yeah, an elderly man with a poor memory. It's classic. Like when I would imagine that if you are a lawyer in the scenario advising the president and someone asks you a question about something that happened up to 40 years ago, because the man was alive during World War II, he's had a very long life. If you don't know the specific response to the question being asked, if you can't remember an exact date or a time of day or something like that, the classic advice is to say, I don't recall.
I don't recall.
That's why whenever Trump has been ordered to testify or been deposed about anything, him or Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't recall Taylor Greene. That's why they get up and they say, I don't recall. Because if you haven't got the exact fact there to memory, or you misremember something, it was a Tuesday instead of a Thursday, and you say that on the record, like that can be problematic for you later. So it's pretty standard practice to say, I don't recall during a big barrage of questionings like that. I would imagine that would be standard lawyerly advice. It's like, if you don't remember specifically, you say, I don't recall. So for them to then turn that around on him and use that against him is like, that's a pretty low blow. And like, that's the thing that most people are concerned about with Joe Biden is his advanced stage and his faculties. And so it's like another blow against him, another week of news stories that question his competence in the public square. Like if you're the Biden campaign, you would be absolutely spitting chips about this. You know what I mean? It's the exact thing that you're wanting to get away from narratively as a campaign. So
yeah.
Is an old wooden ship. Speaking of old wooden ships, a video has emerged this week of our former Deputy Prime Minister having a good time. Tom, what does this video show? What are we watching here?
Oh, just a Canberran local walking down Lonsdale Street in Braddon. Lovely spot. I know it well. And just coming across Barnaby Joyce lying in the street. It's about 11:30 at night. He's on his back in the same suit that he was wearing to Question Time that day, to a phone.
Okay, well, we'll play the clip. It's mainly for the video viewers rather than the audio viewers. But it's essentially the guy's just walking down the street. He sees Barnaby Joyce and just mumbling obscenities into a phone while he's on his back on the ground. So it's and Daily Mail knows that you want to see this video, which is why they've posted the Daily Mail Australia watermark right over the center of the video. They're like, we're not even going to put it in the corner in case you motherfuckers crop it out. We know you want to see this bad boy and we know you're going to use it on your own websites. So we're going to make sure everyone knows just Barnaby Joyce is walking around with a Daily Mail watermark on his forehead.
Yeah.
Anyway, here we go.
He's just walking along. There he is.
There's Barnaby on the ground.
He's got a foot up.
Now, can we hear him?
And he keeps walking.
Oh, no. And the guy keeps walking. So I know there's that's something that's been raised by Barnaby's new wife, Vicky Campion, saying like, "Oh, why didn't you ask if he needed help? That's atrocious. Like that you just walk past a guy lying in the street, you didn't ask him for any help.
He needed help, and it's like, no, I'm pretty sure he was doing just fine. He didn't need anyone's help.
Yeah.
He was on the phone having a chin wag about some thing.
Well, the one quote that people seem to have pulled from his mumbling, which I was wondering if we could hear it in the video.
No, they bleeped it out.
They blur it out, right? Okay. Is that he is mumbling the phrase "dead fucking cunt" into the phone.
The former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. Everyone,
he just says "dead fucking cunt" into the phone, and since in a case of damage control, sort of following this, Vicky Campion has like released statements about this, saying that he was talking to her on the phone at the time, but said he wasn't calling me a dead fucking cunt. He was referring to himself.
I quote, "I think he was calling himself one. He likes to self-flagellate," she said. The fact that she is unsure of how the term was being used
is concerning.
Is very concerning.
Yeah. Does that mean she picked up the phone and she was just like,
the fact that she, the only other participant in the conversation, was unsure of the context of the conversation
of who he was incredibly concerning. Yeah. And the way they tell the story was that he was sitting on, from those who've seen the video, there's like a pot plant,
a little planter
box there that he was sitting on, and then he fell over and just decided to stay on the ground. Like he just decided to stay there. And I was talking to my partner about this yesterday, being like, I know we all, rumors and accusations running rampant of Barnaby Joyce being intoxicated in Parliament and just being a huge
couldn't possibly comment on any of those rumors.
Possibly comment on any of those rumors. But just the fact that drunk off his face or not, that's a weird thing to do. Just to stay on the floor.
Just to lie down on the floor.
Like, so when everyone's saying like, oh, what a pisshead. It's like him being drunk makes more sense for this. If he's saying, no, I wasn't drunk,
I hope he's
staying down there?
hope he's drunk. If he's not drunk, it's much more concerning.
It's much weirder, right?
I've gotten drunk and wanted to have a bit of a lie down, impromptu lie downs in different spots, before public places. But
I remember you were unconsciously you were drunk and unconsciously planning an ambush on some of my staff members at one point.
Fine. We don't need to go into that story. Jesus Christ. But is he still Nationals leader?
No.
It's
Little Proud is
Little
he?
Proud, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So
Mr. Joyce has hit back at the embarrassing clip saying, quote, if I had known someone was there with a camera, I would have got up quicker. It's not the camera that's the problem, Barnaby. The problem is you're lying on the street.
Yeah.
Public road in the middle of it. If you fall over, you get up.
I was watching the new one about the new documentary about the Prime Minister's, what's it called? Nemesis. And you look at some of these old Liberal ministers and coalition ministers, you look at Barnaby and who's the other one? The former Attorney General.
Christian Porter.
I was going to say, no, the other before that. Subsection C.
George
what was his name? George Brandis. They've got very, very red noses, which leads me to believe...
Whatever it leads you to believe will be kept in your head for legal purposes.
Yeah. But it's there's been reports in, throughout the last 2 years that
Canberra is a very boozy place. Yeah.
Boozy place.
I remember when all the stuff about Allan Tudge and his mistress was coming out, where it was talking about, going out to pubs and this whole kind of open secret pub culture.
Public bar in Monica. That's where you'll find them all.
It does seem like there's a very work hard, play hard type environment at Canberra House. Although with some of these ministers, I question whether the work hard part of the equation is necessarily taken as seriously as the play hard part of it. But it certainly seems like an environment that is not adverse to a little tipple every now and then.
Yeah. But the thing is, you can't kill Barnaby. Barnaby is...
You physically cannot.
Frankenstein, man. Any other politician, he'd have to quit. Resign.
Can you imagine?
But I get up again. You're never going to keep me down. I get knocked down.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was a tub thumping reference in here. Can you imagine if this was any of the women?
Oh yeah, just Penny Wong sprawled out on the side of the road, calling someone a dead fucking cunt on camera.
She'd be done.
Chaos.
All of any of them would be done.
Listen,
and the fact that Barnaby has had enough of these gaffes that we're all just going to laugh about it and then nothing will come of it.
Oh, Barnaby.
Oh, Barnaby.
The reason that people aren't allowed to fuck in Parliament House anymore is because of Barnaby. Because of the woman who is now his second wife was a former staff member of his that he was conducting an affair with while she was his staff member. We're looking at patient zero.
But the thing will be at the next federal election, his primary will probably just go up.
He's going to win votes on the back of this. People just like him more. They're like, you know what? That's relatable. I too have been back down on the street, face up to the stars. Because calling someone a dead fucking cunt.
I wish I had the 9 lives that Barnaby has. Just do whatever you want.
He's got to be running low. Surely he can only have 3 or 4 left.
I don't know.
Yes, what a colossal piece of shit. I think the fantastic little bow on this is that someone has gone to Lonsdale Street in Braddon and drawn a chalk outline of where he was next to the planter box.
Classic.
It's sensational. I don't know who did that, but you're a goddamn national hero. That's brilliant. I love it.
Anyway, on that note, we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you visit us on all the bullshit social media that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and motherflipping TikTok. If you see a thumbs up somewhere, a rate, a share, click it. Give us the maximum stars. I'm hungry for your stars. Make sure you follow us on me on social media, Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me down to the local bar in Canberra, and I'll be having a bevy with Barnaby Joyce.
A bevy or 10. On that note, no, I've already done that. Thanks for listening. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.